People always said I looked successful. I had a good job. I lived in a tall building in the city. I wore clean shirts and expensive shoes. I answered emails faster than anyone in my office. But every morning I woke up tired. Not normal tired, a deep kind of tired, the kind that stayed inside your chest. Every day felt the same. I woke up at 6:30. I drank coffee without tasting it. I stood inside crowded trains with people who looked just as empty as me. Then I sat in front of a bright computer screen for 10 hours. Sometimes more. My manager liked me because I never said no. Can you finish this tonight? Yes. Can you work this weekend? Yes. Can you join another project? Yes. I said yes to work so many times that I forgot how to say yes to life. One Friday night, I left the office after midnight. The streets were wet from rain. Cold wind moved between the buildings. A young couple sat inside a small noodle shop near the station. They were laughing over something simple, maybe a joke, maybe nothing important. I looked at them for a few seconds. Then I checked another work message. I kept walking. My phone suddenly rang. It was my mother. I almost did not answer. I was too tired to talk, but something inside me said, "Pick up," so I did. "Hello, Mom." Her voice sounded warm and soft, like always. "Did I wake you?" she asked. "No, I just finished work." There was a short silence. Then she said quietly, "Your father asked about you again today." I closed my eyes for a second. "Is he okay?" "He's fine," she said quickly. "He just misses you." Outside the station, people walked past me quickly. Everyone looked busy. Everyone looked like they were chasing something. "I know," I said. "I've just been very busy lately." "You always say that." Her voice was gentle, but it hurt more because of that. I leaned against the wall near a convenience store. "I'll visit next month," I said. "I promise." Another silence. Then she laughed softly. "You said the same thing 3 months ago." I did not know what to say, because she was right. I always had a reason, a meeting, a deadline, a project, a promotion. Work always came first. "Your father still keeps your old room clean," she said. "He thinks you may come home suddenly one day." My chest felt heavy. I looked across the street at the office building behind me. Some lights were still on even after midnight. People were probably still working inside, just like me. "I'll come soon," I repeated. This time my voice sounded weaker. After the call ended, I stood there for a long time. Cars moved past me. Rainwater reflected the city lights. My phone vibrated again with another work message. I opened it immediately. Then I stopped. For some reason, I suddenly felt angry. Not at my boss, not at the company, at myself. I could not remember the last real conversation I had with my parents. I could not remember the last time I watched a sunset without checking my phone. I could not remember the last time I felt happy without being productive. That scared me. But the next morning, I still went back to work. Because habits are powerful. Days passed again. Monday became Wednesday. Wednesday became Friday. Everything moved fast. One night, I fell asleep at my desk for a few minutes. When I opened my eyes, the office was dark and quiet. My neck hurt. My coffee was cold. I looked around and suddenly had a strange thought. If I disappear tomorrow, would my life mean anything? The question stayed in my mind longer than I expected. I tried to ignore it. But 2 days later, my phone rang again. This time it was 5 a.m. No one calls at 5 a.m. for small reasons. My heart started beating fast before I even answered. "Mom!" I heard crying. Then my mother's shaking voice. "Your father is in the hospital." Everything inside me froze. The city outside my apartment window was still dark. Cars moved slowly below. Somewhere far away, I heard an ambulance. "What happened?" I asked quickly. "He collapsed this morning." I could barely breathe. Is he okay?" "We don't know yet." For a moment the world became completely silent. I looked at my laptop on the table, still open, still full of unfinished work. And suddenly none of it mattered anymore. Not the projects, not the emails, not the overtime, nothing. I packed my bag with shaking hands. At the train station, the morning crowd pushed around me. People rushed to work with coffee cups and tired faces, just like every other day. But I was not thinking about work anymore. I was thinking about all the times I said, later, next month, after this project, when life becomes less busy. I sat by the train window and watched the city slowly disappear. For the first time in many years, I asked myself a question I was too afraid to ask before. What if later never comes? The train arrived in my hometown just after noon. The air smelled different there, cooler, cleaner, slower. When I stepped out of the station, I saw fewer people, fewer cars, and smaller buildings. Nothing had really changed. But somehow everything felt different to me. Maybe because I had changed. My mother was waiting outside. The moment I saw her, my chest tightened. She looked smaller than before, not shorter, just older. There were new lines on her face. Her hair looked thinner. She smiled when she saw me, but her eyes looked tired. "You came quickly," she said softly. I nodded. "How's Dad?" "He's stable now," she replied. "The doctor says he needs rest." I let out a slow breath. On the drive home, we did not talk much. The streets were quiet. Small restaurants stood beside old shops. A man rode past us on a bicycle. Children played near a park. I remembered these streets. Years ago, I used to walk here every day without thinking about time. Now every corner felt like a memory. When we reached home, I stood outside the gate for a few seconds. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was older. The mailbox leaned slightly to one side. The small garden near the door had fewer flowers now, but it still felt warm. My mother opened the door slowly. "Come in," she said. The smell inside hit me immediately. Rice, tea, old wood, the smell of home. I looked around quietly. Nothing had changed much. The old clock still hung on the wall. Family photos still covered the shelves. My father's reading glasses still sat beside the sofa. My eyes stopped at one photo. It was a picture of me from high school. I was holding a guitar and smiling widely. I stared at that photo for a long moment. I could not remember the last time I smiled like that. "Your father is awake," my mother said gently. I followed her down the hallway. My steps suddenly felt heavy. When she opened the bedroom door, I almost stopped breathing. My father looked weak, very weak. He lay quietly in bed with a thin blanket over his body. Machines stood beside him. His face looked pale. But when he saw me, he smiled immediately. "There you are," he said softly. That smile hurt me more than anger would have. I walked closer to the bed. "How are you feeling?" I asked. "Still alive," he joked quietly. I forced myself to smile, but inside I felt terrible. I should have visited earlier. I should have called more often. I should have been there. My father looked at me carefully. "You lost weight," he said. I almost laughed. Even now he was worrying about me. "I'm okay," I replied. He nodded slowly. Then he said something simple. "You work too much." The room became quiet again, because we both knew it was true. That evening my mother cooked dinner. The same dishes I loved when I was young. braised chicken, soup with vegetables, fried eggs with soy sauce. I sat at the table while she moved around the kitchen quietly. "You didn't need to cook so much," I said. She smiled a little. "You finally came home. Of course I should cook." Her words sounded normal, but guilt slowly filled my chest again. How many dinners had they eaten without me? How many birthdays had I missed? How many times did they wait for my call? During dinner, my father tried to act normal. He asked about my job. He asked about the city. He asked if I was sleeping enough. I answered everything with short replies. But something felt strange. For years, I believed I was too busy for this life. Too busy for slow dinners. Too busy for family conversations. Too busy for quiet evenings. But now, sitting at that small table, I suddenly realized something. This was life, not the office, not the meetings, not the endless deadlines. This. After dinner, my mother washed dishes while my father rested in the living room. I walked slowly through the house alone. When I passed my old room, I stopped. The door was slightly open. I pushed it gently. The room looked frozen in time. My old desk still stood near the window. Books still filled the shelves. A basketball sat in the corner. And beside the bed, covered in dust, was my old guitar. I walked toward it slowly. My fingers touched the strings softly. A quiet sound filled the room. I remembered long summer nights. I remembered writing songs I never finished. I remembered dreams that once felt important. Traveling, music, writing stories. Back then, I thought life would become bigger and brighter as I grew older. But somewhere along the way, life became smaller. Smaller and smaller. Until it was only work. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room. Then I noticed something near the bookshelf. A calendar. My mother had marked several dates with small circles. I walked closer. They were all holidays. Next to some dates, she wrote small notes. Maybe he can visit. Ask him again. Family dinner? I could not move for several seconds. They had been waiting for me the whole time, and I was always too busy. That night, after my parents went to sleep, I sat alone in the kitchen drinking water. The house was completely quiet. Then I heard slow footsteps behind me. It was my father. "You should rest," I said quickly. He sat down across from me anyway. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at me calmly and said, "Life is not only work." Such a simple sentence, but it stayed inside me like a stone sinking deep into water. I looked down at my hands. For the first time in years, I did not know if I was living the right life anymore. I woke up early the next morning. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I heard birds outside the window. Not traffic, not phone alarms, not office sounds, just birds. Soft morning light entered my old room. Dust moved slowly through the air. I sat up quietly and looked around. Everything still felt strange to me. Not because the room changed, because I had changed so much. Downstairs, I heard my mother cooking breakfast. Oil crackled softly in the kitchen. Someone on the street laughed loudly. The world felt slow here. After breakfast, my father went back to sleep. My mother cleaned the house quietly. I told her I wanted to organize my old room a little. She smiled immediately. "I hoped you would say that." I started with the desk near the window. Old notebooks, school papers, movie tickets, pens that no longer worked. Every small thing felt like a message from another version of myself. A happier version. Then I found a blue notebook under a pile of books. The corners were bent. The cover looked old. When I opened it, I froze. It was my dream notebook. I used to write in it almost every night when I was younger. The first page said, "Things I want before I turn 30. I laughed softly. Then the laughter disappeared, because I was already 32. I slowly turned the pages. The handwriting looked messy and excited. I want to travel alone one day. I want to play music in front of people. I want to write stories that help others feel less lonely. I want to buy my parents a small house near the sea. Simple dreams, small dreams. But they felt alive. I sat there for a long time without moving. When did I stop dreaming? I honestly could not remember. Maybe it happened slowly. One busy day after another. One delayed dream after another. At some point, survival became more important than living. My phone suddenly vibrated beside me. A work message. My body reacted immediately. I reached for the phone automatically. Then I stopped. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before turning it face down. For once, I did not want work to enter this room. Not this room, not these memories. Later that afternoon, my mother asked me to buy some things from a nearby store. I walked through town alone. The streets looked exactly like they did years ago. An old bakery still stood near the corner. The bookstore still had the same faded sign. Even the small toy machine near the supermarket was still there. I suddenly remembered how badly I once wanted to grow up. When I was young, adulthood looked exciting. Freedom, money, big cities, big dreams. No one told me adulthood could also feel empty. As I walked past a small cafe, someone called my name. I turned around. It was Daniel, my old friend from high school. He looked surprised for half a second. Then he smiled widely. "No way," he said. "You're actually here." We laughed and shook hands. Daniel looked different from me. Not richer, not more successful, but lighter. His eyes looked calm. His smile looked real. We sat inside the cafe and talked for almost 2 hours. He told me he worked at a local school now. "The pay isn't amazing," he admitted with a laugh, "but I like my life." I looked around the cafe. A little girl sat beside her father drawing pictures. 2 old women shared bread and tea near the window. Everyone looked relaxed. Meanwhile, my mind suddenly remembered my office building. Bright screens, grey walls. People eating lunch alone at their desks. "You ever think about leaving the city?" Daniel asked. I hesitated. "Sometimes." "That means yes," he said. I smiled weakly. Maybe he was right. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Remember when you used to play guitar every day?" he asked. I laughed quietly. "That feels like another life." "You were good," he said seriously. "You looked happy back then." Happy? That word stayed in my head, because I could not remember the last time someone described me that way. Before leaving, Daniel said something simple. "You know, success looks different now." I looked at him carefully. "What do you mean?" He smiled. "When we were young, we thought success meant becoming important to the world." He paused. "Now I think success means having peace when you go to sleep." I did not answer immediately, because part of me knew he was right. That evening, I walked home slowly while the sun disappeared behind the buildings. The sky turned orange and pink. People rode bicycles past me. Families walked together. Someone played music from an open window. The whole town felt alive in a quiet way. Back in the city, nights only felt loud. At dinner, my father looked a little stronger. He noticed I seemed distracted. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. I looked down at my bowl. Then I answered honestly, "I don't know if I'm living the life I wanted." My parents stayed quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet. Gentle quiet. the kind that gives someone space to think. That night, I returned to my room and opened the blue notebook again. I read every page slowly, every dream, every plan, every hopeful sentence. Then I looked at my reflection in the dark window. And suddenly, I did not recognize myself anymore. I had money. I had a career. I had a nice apartment in the city. But somewhere along the way, I lost the person who wrote those pages. I sat on the floor beside my bed until midnight. The room was silent, except for the soft sound of wind outside. Then, very quietly, I asked myself the question I had avoided for years. Did I waste my life chasing the wrong thing? The next morning, sunlight filled the kitchen. My mother stood near the stove, humming softly while she cooked breakfast. The smell of toast and eggs spread through the house. My father walked into the kitchen slowly. He still looked weak, but his face had more color now. "You look better," I said. "That means I'm handsome again," he replied. My mother rolled her eyes immediately. "He was never handsome," she said. I laughed, a real laugh. Not the small, polite laugh I used at work, the kind that comes out naturally. My father smiled after hearing it. "You used to laugh like that all the time," he said quietly. His words stayed with me the entire morning. After breakfast, he surprised me by putting on his jacket. "Where are you going?" my mother asked. He looked at me. "I want to take a walk with my son." "You should rest," she said quickly. "I've rested enough." He smiled stubbornly. So we left together. The air outside felt cool and fresh. We walked slowly through the neighborhood, very slowly. My father stopped often because he became tired easily, but he never complained. We passed old houses with small gardens. A dog barked behind a gate. A delivery man waved at my father like they knew each other for years. Everyone seemed connected here. In the city, I barely knew my neighbors. After a few minutes, we reached a small coffee shop near the river. I remembered the place immediately. My father used to bring me there when I was a child. The owner looked older now, but he still recognized us. "Well," he said with a smile, "the busy son finally came home." I felt embarrassed. My father only laughed. We sat near the window with 2 cups of hot coffee. Outside, sunlight danced softly on the river. For a while, neither of us spoke, but this silence felt peaceful, not awkward. I realized something strange then. I spent years chasing excitement, big goals, big promotions, big achievements. But peace felt better, much better. My father suddenly pointed outside the window. "Look." An old man sat beside the river, feeding birds quietly. Nothing special was happening. No music, no cameras, no audience, just a simple moment. "He comes here every morning," my father said, "rain or shine." I watched the old man for a few seconds. "He looks happy," I said. My father nodded slowly. "Many people think happiness comes after success." He took a sip of coffee. "But sometimes happiness comes first. Then everything else feels easier." I stared down at my cup quietly. No one ever taught me that before. All my life, I believed happiness was a reward. Something you earned after enough hard work. But what if I had the order completely wrong? After leaving the coffee shop, we continued walking beside the river. The trees moved gently in the wind. A young mother pushed a stroller nearby. 2 teenagers laughed while sharing earphones. Someone practiced guitar under a tree. Small, ordinary moments. Yet suddenly, they felt important. Maybe because I finally noticed them. At one point, my father stopped walking and sat on a bench. "You okay?" I asked quickly. "I'm fine," he said with a small smile. "Just old." I sat beside him. For a few minutes we watched the river quietly. Then he spoke again. You know what the strange thing about life is? What? People always think they have more time. I looked at him carefully. He kept watching the water as he spoke. That's why people wait. He counted softly on his fingers. I'll rest later. I'll travel later. I'll spend time with family later. I'll enjoy life later. Each sentence felt painfully familiar, because those were my exact words. My father turned toward me slowly. One day you wake up, he said, and many years are gone. The wind moved gently through the trees. Somewhere nearby, a bicycle bell rang softly. Everything looked calm, but inside me, something was breaking apart, or maybe finally waking up. I suddenly saw my own life clearly. Years disappearing inside office buildings, late nights under white lights, missed birthdays, missed calls, missed moments, all because I believed life would begin someday in the future. But life had already been happening. Without me. My father leaned back against the bench and closed his eyes for a moment. You know what I remember most? He asked quietly. What? Not work. He smiled faintly. I remember eating ice cream with you near this river when you were 10. I laughed softly. You dropped yours on the ground. And you cried for 20 minutes, he added. We both laughed together. Then his smile slowly faded into something gentler. That's life, he said quietly. Small moments. I looked around again. The river, the sunlight, the sound of wind through leaves. Nothing extraordinary. But suddenly it felt more valuable than anything I had in the city. That evening we sat outside the house together watching the sunset. The sky slowly turned gold and orange. My mother brought us tea and sat beside us quietly. No one talked much. We did not need to. For years I believed meaningful moments needed to be big. A promotion, a new apartment, a perfect future. But sitting there beside my parents, listening to evening insects and watching the sky darken slowly, I finally understood something important. Life was never hiding in the future. It was always here, inside ordinary days. And I had almost missed it completely. 3 days later, I returned to the city. The train moved slowly away from my hometown, while my parents stood on the platform waving goodbye. My mother smiled warmly. My father lifted one hand slowly because he still became tired easily. I watched them through the train window until they disappeared. Then I sat back quietly. I did not open my laptop during the trip. I simply looked outside. Mountains, fields, small houses, clouds moving across the sky. Life kept moving peacefully without deadlines. When I arrived back in the city, everything felt louder than before. Car horns, bright advertisements, people rushing through stations. Only 1 week earlier, this life felt normal to me. Now it felt strange, almost unreal. The next morning, I returned to work. The office looked exactly the same. Grey walls, cold air conditioning, the sound of keyboards filling the room. But something inside me had changed. My manager walked toward me almost immediately. "Glad you're back," he said quickly. "We have a new project starting." Before, I would have answered automatically. Yes, of course. But this time I paused. Then I said something I almost never said before. "I can help," I replied calmly, "but I won't stay every night anymore." He looked surprised. Honestly, I was surprised too. For a second, I felt guilty. Then I remembered my father sitting beside the river. People always think they have more time. The guilt slowly disappeared. That evening, I left the office while the sun was still in the sky. It felt almost illegal. People around me still sat at their desks staring at screens. I used to feel proud of that life. Now it only made me sad. On the way home, I stopped at a supermarket. Not for instant noodles, Real food, vegetables, eggs, fresh meat, fruit. The cashier smiled politely. "Cooking tonight?" she asked. I smiled back. "Yeah, I think so." Inside my apartment, the silence felt different now. Before, silence felt lonely. Now it felt peaceful. I cooked slowly while music played softly from my phone. The food was not amazing. Actually, the rice was a little burnt. But for some reason, I still smiled while eating. Because I was finally taking care of myself. That night, instead of opening my work laptop, I opened my closet. After moving things around, I found my old guitar case in the back corner. Dust covered the top. I stared at it quietly for a moment. Then I opened it. The guitar was old, but still beautiful. I touched the strings softly. A weak sound filled the room. My fingers moved awkwardly at first. I forgot many chords, but slowly little pieces of memory returned. I played for almost an hour that night. Not for money, not for success. Just because it made me feel alive. After that, small things started changing. I began calling my parents every evening. Sometimes we talked for 30 minutes, sometimes only 5. But I called. I started taking walks without headphones. I watched sunsets from my apartment window. I visited bookstores again. I slept earlier. Little by little, my life stopped feeling like a race. One Saturday morning, I opened the blue notebook again. The dream notebook. I read every page carefully. Then I grabbed a pen and added something new at the bottom. Learn how to live before life becomes too late. I stared at the sentence for a long time. Then I laughed softly. Maybe I was finally becoming honest with myself. A few weeks later, my phone vibrated while I was cooking dinner. It was a message from my mother. "Your father walked outside today. He smiled a lot. He says he misses you already." Attached to the message was a small photo. My father sat outside near the garden, holding a cup of tea. The evening sunlight touched his face softly. He looked peaceful. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table and looked at the photo again. Then suddenly tears filled my eyes. Not because I was sad, because I almost lost all of this. For years I thought success meant becoming someone important. But now, sitting alone in my small apartment, with tears quietly falling down my face, I finally understood something simple. A meaningful life is not built from big moments alone. It is built from dinners with family, phone calls from a mother, morning sunlight, old songs, slow walks, shared laughter, ordinary days. The things I once believed were small were actually the biggest things of all. That night, I stood by the window, looking at the city lights. Cars moved endlessly below. Office towers still glowed in the darkness. Somewhere inside those buildings, people were still working late, just like I used to. I closed my eyes for a moment. Then I whispered softly to myself, "I don't want to waste my life anymore."